If you had told Kate Benjamin on the night she collapsed on the cold tile of a university library that her life would soon depend on the one person she had spent 4 years humiliating, she would have laughed in your face. But fate doesn't ask permission, and sometimes the people we treat as invisible are the ones quietly holding the thread our entire life hangs from. This is the story of Kate and Flora. One girl had everything the world seemed to want. The other had nothing anyone seemed to notice. And by the end of this story, you will understand why the greatest act of love is sometimes given by the person who had every reason to walk away. Stay until the end, because the twist in this story is something almost no one sees coming. The first day of university housing assignments is supposed to feel exciting. New beginnings, new roommates, new chapters. For Flora Bennett, it felt like walking into a spotlight she never asked for. She arrived at her dorm room carrying 2 suitcases and a box of books, her hands trembling slightly from nerves. She was quiet by nature, the kind of girl who preferred the hush of a library to the noise of a party. She was brilliant, top of her class in high school, already volunteering at a community clinic on weekends, already dreaming of becoming a doctor. But she was also overweight, self-conscious, and used to being overlooked. When she opened the door to room 214, she found a girl already unpacking designer suitcases, hanging up a mirror, arranging a vanity table like she was preparing for a photo shoot rather than a semester of classes. That girl was Kate. Kate Benjamin was the kind of beauty that made people stop mid-sentence. Golden hair, sharp green eyes, a smile that could disarm professors and charm entire lecture halls. She had grown up being told she was special. Pageant trophies since childhood, boys chasing her since middle school, teachers who overlooked her flaws because she was, as everyone put it, just so likable. She looked Flora up and down once, said, "Oh," in a tone that already carried judgment, and went back to arranging her makeup brushes. That single "oh" would become the theme of the next 4 years. At first, it was small things. Kate would forget to wake Flora up for early classes. She'd leave passive-aggressive notes about Flora's snacks smelling up the room. She'd invite friends over late at night, laughing loudly while Flora tried to study, rolling her eyes if Flora asked for quiet. But it escalated. By the second semester, Kate had turned humiliating Flora into something of a hobby. She'd hide Flora's clothes right before an 8 a.m. lecture, forcing her to scramble in a panic. She'd make comments in the dining hall, just loud enough for tables nearby to hear, about how some people should really consider the salad bar. She'd invite boys back to the room specifically to watch Flora's reaction when they laughed at jokes made at her expense. She started rumors too, that Flora was weird, that she creeped people out, that she probably had no friends because she was a freak. None of it was true. But cruelty doesn't need truth. It only needs an audience. And Kate always had an audience. The strange thing was, Flora never fought back. She never yelled. She never reported her to the housing office. She never even cried in front of anyone. She simply absorbed it, quietly, like a sponge absorbs water until one day it can't hold anymore. Some of her classmates asked her why she didn't stand up for herself. Flora would just shrug and say, "It's not worth the energy," before returning to her books or heading off to her volunteer shifts at the clinic. People assumed she was weak. They had no idea how wrong they were.
By their 3rd year, Kate had become something of a campus icon. She won the university's beauty pageant 2 years running. She dated the captain of the swim team, then the student council president, then a guy from a wealthy family who showered her with gifts. She had thousands of followers on social media, all of them watching her curated, glowing life. Parties, brunches, vacations, a boyfriend who called her the most perfect girl he'd ever met. Meanwhile, Flora kept her head down. She earned a spot in a prestigious pre-med research program. She spent her weekends at the free clinic downtown, helping translate for elderly patients, restocking supplies, sometimes just sitting with people who had no one else to talk to. Nobody paid attention to Flora's life. Everybody watched Kate's. If you had asked anyone on campus who was the winner between the two roommates, the answer would have been obvious. But that answer was about to be shattered completely. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Kate was in the middle of a marketing lecture when she suddenly felt dizzy. Her vision blurred. Her hands went cold and clammy. She stood up to leave the room and get some air and collapsed in the hallway before she even reached the door. She was rushed to the hospital. At first, doctors assumed exhaustion, maybe low blood sugar, but blood tests revealed something far more serious. Kate's kidneys were failing. Not suddenly, this had been building for years, silently, likely worsened by dangerous crash diets, dehydration, and the stimulant-heavy weight loss supplements she'd been secretly taking to maintain her perfect figure for pageants and photos. The diagnosis was devastating: advanced kidney failure. Without a transplant, she would need dialysis for the rest of her life, if she was lucky. Without a transplant soon, doctors warned, her body might not hold out at all. The golden girl of campus was suddenly fighting for her life in a hospital bed. Here is something that no one tells you about popularity. It is loud, but it is often shallow. When news of Kate's illness spread, there was an initial wave of sympathy, flowers, messages, a few visits. But illness is not glamorous. It does not photograph well. It does not fit into a highlight reel. Within weeks, the visits slowed. The messages stopped. Friends who once fought for Kate's attention now found excuses to be busy. Her boyfriend, who had once posted long captions about forever and meant to be, stopped answering her calls entirely. When she finally reached him, he told her, gently, cowardly, that he wasn't ready to deal with something this heavy and that maybe they should take a break. He never came back. Doctors tested Kate's parents for a kidney match. Neither was compatible. Her only sibling, a younger brother, was tested next, also not a match. The family exhausted every relative they could find. None worked. The hospital placed Kate on a transplant waiting list, but with kidney transplant wait lists often stretching for years, her doctors were blunt: her body might not hold out the wait. For the first time in her life, Kate, the girl who had always been chosen, always wanted, always the center of every room, was utterly alone, except for one person she never expected.
While Kate's world crumbled, Flora did something no one asked her to do. She quietly went to the hospital and requested to be tested as a potential donor. She told no one, not her professors, not her clinic supervisors, not a single friend. She simply filled out the paperwork, gave her blood, and waited. Days later, the results came back. Flora was a perfect match. The doctors were stunned, not just by the compatibility, but by who was offering. When they gently reminded Flora of her history with Kate, informing her she had absolutely no obligation to donate, especially to someone who had treated her so cruelly for years, Flora simply nodded and said she understood. Then she said, quietly, "I still want to do it." When Kate found out who her donor was, she initially refused, not because guilt had softened her, not because she suddenly regretted her cruelty. She refused because she could not bear the humiliation of owing her life, her actual life, to the girl she had spent 4 years tormenting. "I'd rather wait for another match," she told her doctors, her voice sharp even from a hospital bed. But there might not be another match, not in time. Flora came to see her. It was the first real conversation the two had shared in years, without an audience, without cruelty, without an agenda. Kate, pale and weakened, barely looked at her. "Why would you do this, after everything I did to you?" Flora's answer was simple, steady, without bitterness. "I don't want you to owe me anything," she said. "I just don't want someone to die when I have the ability to help." Kate stared at her, searching for sarcasm, for some hidden trap. She found none. Eventually, worn down by illness and the quiet persistence of a girl who had never once asked for anything in return, Kate agreed. The operation took place on a rainy morning in late spring. Flora was wheeled into surgery first. Hours later, in an adjoining room, Kate followed. The procedure was successful. Flora's kidney began functioning inside Kate's body almost immediately, and within days, color returned to Kate's face for the first time in months. The campus, of course, found out. It became something of a local legend, the girl who saved the roommate who bullied her. Reporters from the student newspaper wanted interviews. Kate's old friends suddenly reappeared, eager to be photographed near this feel-good story. Flora wanted none of it. She declined every interview and asked hospital staff to keep her recovery private. Kate, recovering in the bed beside her, assumed this act of anonymous generosity was the whole story. She had no idea the truth was so much larger. Months after the surgery, once Kate had regained her strength and returned to campus, she went searching for Flora to properly thank her, to apologize, to somehow make right what 4 years of cruelty had broken. But Flora was gone. She had quietly transferred to another university to continue her medical studies, leaving no forwarding information, no social media trace, nothing. It was then that one of Kate's surgeons approached her with a sealed envelope. "Flora left this with me before the operation," the surgeon explained. "She said I should only give it to you if she chose not to tell you herself. She never came back to ask me to destroy it, so I think that means she wants you to have it now." Kate's hands shook as she opened the letter. What she read inside would change her understanding of everything. The letter began simply, "Kate, if you're reading this, it means I never found the courage to say this to your face, so let me say it here instead." Flora explained that years before they ever became roommates, back when they were both still in high school, she had learned a devastating truth about her own father. He had been involved in a drunk driving accident, a fatal one. The victim was a woman named Diane Benjamin, Kate's mother. The case, Flora wrote, had been settled quietly, away from public attention, in part because of the family's wishes for privacy during their grief. Kate had grown up knowing her mother died in a car accident, but she never knew the driver's identity. The details were sealed, the settlement handled discreetly, and Kate's father had shielded her from the specifics, believing it would only deepen her pain to know a name. Flora had recognized the surname the very first day they moved in together. She had frozen in the doorway of their dorm room sheet, seeing Benjamin printed beside her own name and realizing with quiet horror exactly who Kate was. "I thought about telling you so many times," Flora wrote, "but I couldn't. You would have hated an innocent daughter for her father's mistake, a mistake you never even knew existed. I couldn't be the one who took away the last comfortable version of your mother's memory." She wrote about the years of cruelty that followed, the humiliations, the rumors, the loneliness, and how somehow she had come to understand it differently than everyone else did. "I used to wonder if some part of you sensed something was wrong before you even knew why, like there was a wound in you that had never healed and you didn't know where it came from, so it came out as anger instead. I'm not excusing what you did to me. I carried it. It hurt, but I understood in a strange way that you were carrying something heavier than either of us realized.
And then came the final lines, the ones that would stay with Kate for the rest of her life. Donating my kidney was never about earning your forgiveness or proving I was better than you or waiting for some Hollywood redemption moment. It was simple. My father's mistake took one life. I was not going to let it take two. Be well, Kate. I truly hope you find peace. Kate sat alone in her dorm room, the letter trembling in her hands, and wept in a way she had never before, not for herself, but for the girl she had spent 4 years trying to break, who had been carrying a secret grief heavier than anything Kate had ever known.
Kate spent the following months trying to track Flora down. She called every hospital contact she could find. She messaged old classmates. She even reached out to the community clinic where Flora used to volunteer, hoping someone there might have a forwarding address. But Flora had made herself deliberately hard to find. She wasn't hiding out of anger or spite. She simply wanted to move forward, to build her career, to become the doctor she had always dreamed of being, without being defined by either her father's mistake or Kate's cruelty. Kate eventually had to accept that some apologies cannot be delivered on your own timeline. Sometimes you have to carry the debt of your own growth silently and hope that one day life gives you the chance to show it rather than simply say it. Nearly 6 years passed. Kate had changed. The old version of herself, obsessed with attention, cruelty as entertainment, beauty as currency, had been replaced by someone quieter, more reflective. She had gone into non-profit work, specifically focusing on healthcare access for low-income communities, though she rarely spoke publicly about why. One autumn evening, she attended a charity gala for kidney disease research and transplant awareness, an event she had started attending every year since her surgery, always searching the crowd, always hoping. The keynote speaker that night was introduced simply as Dr. Flora Bennett, transplant researcher and community health advocate. Kate's breath caught in her throat. She watched from the back of the room as Flora walked onto the stage, more composed, more confident than the shy roommate Kate remembered, but with that same steady, quiet presence. Flora spoke about her research into transplant accessibility for low-income patients, about the community clinic she had helped expand back in her hometown, about the importance of empathy in medicine. She never once mentioned Kate. She didn't need to. After the event, Kate waited by the exit, her heart pounding harder than it ever had during her illness. When Flora finally emerged, their eyes met. For a long moment, neither said anything. Then Kate stepped forward, tears already forming. "I spent 4 years making your life miserable because I thought you had nothing worth admiring." Flora studied her for a moment, then offered a small, gentle smile. "No," she said softly, "you spent 4 years not knowing who I really was." Kate wiped her eyes. "Why did you save me, after everything?" Flora's answer came without hesitation, the same steady conviction she'd carried since that hospital room years earlier. "Because if I had let you die, my father's mistake would have taken 2 lives instead of 1. The words hit Kate like a wave, not with guilt this time, but with a profound, humbling gratitude for a kind of grace she still wasn't sure she deserved. In the years that followed, Kate created a foundation dedicated to covering kidney treatment costs for university students who couldn't afford care, young people who, like Flora once did, might otherwise carry their burdens in silence. She never used her own name for the foundation. Instead, she dedicated it quietly and anonymously to the woman who taught me that kindness is strongest when it expects nothing in return. Somewhere in a hospital being built with that foundation's funding, a plaque hangs with those words, unnoticed by most visitors who walk past it every day. But some stories were never meant to be loud. Some kindness doesn't ask for applause. It simply asks that one tragedy not create another. If this story moved you, remember this. The people we overlook, the people we underestimate, are often carrying stories far heavier than we could ever imagine. Be kind, not because you expect something back, but because you never truly know what someone else is silently carrying. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, let us know in the comments and subscribe for more stories like this one.